Okay, so Diana, if you have any questions at any point, just feel free to jump in and ask me the questions.
Thank you.
This isn't a very formal situation at all. Okay.
Okay.
I thought I would do two things in today's session. One is basically to kind of talk through some of the things I've seen in the discussion posts that you have all made, some common comments that I would like to make for you to remember moving ahead, and then look at the readings that we have coming up in this module and things to think about or things that resonate with me when I look at these readings as well. So let's begin with some of the things that were interesting about the last module, right? So some of you had picked up on the confirmation bias, negativity bias. Some of you had talked about the curious mind, right? With confirmation bias, that's a really interesting one that to think about in the current context. And you've all obviously resonated with all of you, especially with the idea of the vaccine and listening to what we want to, right? And that's where media as it is set up today is becoming problematic. Because what we have now is, we know that naturally we gravitate towards things we want to hear. Okay, so if that's the situation, unfortunately now you have so many avenues where you can go to only the things that you want to hear. So I can completely limit myself to a Fox News environment or to only specific subsets of audio podcasts or on YouTube. So I can very easily insulate myself into these little worlds, which is where you have that concept of echo chamber, right? Where I talk and I hear my echo, and that's complete confirmation bias. There's nothing wrong in this. We've read that that is human tendency. But unfortunately, the way media is set up now, it enhances this behavior. Now, say 30, 40 years ago, there was this concept of media having to provide a balanced perspective. So a platform like BBC tries to show you both sides of the argument, right? We don't have that anymore. We can completely avoid that and just limit ourselves to my MSN environment or my Fox environment and be very happy with that. This is exacerbated by platforms like YouTube and Instagram and Facebook because their algorithms work off what we prefer. So when it sees me watching videos of one kind, it then says, oh, that's what you like. Here, let me give you 10 more of that. And it just draws me deeper and deeper into the world that is comfortable for me. And there is no space for me to question my beliefs. So I can immediately just tune out all of these things. And that's where the problem is with all the algorithms that are going around now. So if we want to really get a balanced perspective and hear another person's argument, it takes a lot of thoughtful action on our part, where we need to put aside that negativity bias. We've had negative experiences, right? Which is why we don't want to listen to some of these other things as well. And the attitudes that we've grown up with, we now have to take a deep breath and say, okay, I am consciously choosing to step out of my comfort zone to listen to someone else who might sound extremely crazy to me. But maybe there's something there. It is definitely not easy to do, definitely not something I do on a daily basis, but every now and then I do take a step. And again, it's not like I just jump into the, again, my bias, my assumptions coming here when I say into cuckoo land, right? For me, that other side is just completely nuts. So it's not me jumping entirely into that, but taking baby steps on the fringe and seeing, okay, what is happening there? How comfortable am I? Now, at the same time, and this is where our brains are so amazing and so dangerous as well, because even when we start down that path of exploration, sometimes when you go down there just to get to know it, you can get sucked in as well. So it's a delicate balance of where do we stand, what are we trying to do, things like that. A long time ago, it might still happen, but a long time ago, right, there were missionaries who were sent from UK, and they would come to places like India, and missionaries, so their only job was to come teach people over there and convert them to Christianity. And one of the conditions for them was they would stay there for a specific period of time, after which they were forcibly removed and brought back to England. And one of the reasons was they didn't want them going native, to get so drawn into that other environment that you're not thinking of the other side of it. And so it's that same concept, right? You need to pull yourself out. You need to be very grounded and conscious of what your mind is doing and the games that it plays on you, because our mind does play tricks on us, right? And that's kind of what we've been reading all through. It's kind of scary, isn't it, to think that everything depends on our brain and we can't always trust our brain. Yes, Deanna.
I was going to say, I think it too, like what you're saying is we have to like take ourselves out of the tunnel vision and open our minds. Right. But be cautious and careful of going too far the other way too.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. And always keeping in mind that there are positives and negatives to every argument. Nothing is black and white, right? So you take the good from here and the good from there, and then you try and make sense of it. So, and the other thing, when working with learners, right, especially when learners come to you with so many different perspectives, and you're in a classroom and some of these questions and discussions come up, as educators, I mean, when we hear someone going on Earth is flat binge, right? The first reaction for us is like this, all your hackles get raised kind of thing, and you're tensed up and you're like, oh my God, you crazy person. Sometimes it helps to just step out of that and just think of this person as a human being who is also trying to do the best they can every day and get by. Because all of us at the end of the day are trying to do the best that we can in whatever we know and however we know it, right? No one is intentionally trying to be bad or anything. This is a person who thinks they're actually doing something good, and that's where they are at. So as educators, sometimes, even if it's not the way we think about things, it helps to kind of get a perspective by thinking, okay, we're all just trying our best and let's just let it go, right? And in some instances, for me, it is, does it really matter that I have to change this person's mind on this? Does it really make that much of a difference? We can present an argument, but then the rest is up to the person at the end of the day. And I think some of our readings touch on that, right? We are all adults. We get to decide what we want to do, and we have to respect that as well. One of the threads that I noticed in some of our readings and the comments that we were making is the fact that people learn for the exam alone, just to get an A. They're not motivated enough to be really into the topic area, and they're just focusing on an A. And with adults, sometimes I have to wonder what's wrong with that. If my goal is to get a master's or a PhD, I can tell you from a PhD perspective, there were courses like a statistics course that I needed to do. I had to do it, I had to complete it because my end goal is the PhD. Now, is this statistics something I was interested in? No. Would I ever be conducting statistical analysis or studies with that? As much as possible, no. And if I could, I'd bring a methodologist into it. So when I have so many options, did it matter that I really enjoyed the statistics course or I really got into it? No, I needed the A, I worked for the A, I promptly forgot everything. And that's my adult learner prerogative to do that and approach it in that perspective, right? Because that's where I am and that's what I came for. It met my goals. So we need to think of that as well and not say that that's a wrong approach. There is a very clear motivation behind that as well. And if a person says, I'm only here for the A, well, then let's teach them for the, let's make sure that they succeed in getting the A. So maybe it's reframing our argument as in, okay, for the A, you need to be able to master this skill, this skill, this skill, and this skill. Person will get it. Now, the same skill A, B, and C for another learner could be someone who's love statistics and will be doing it forever, we'll tell them, okay, you need to master A, B, and C because you're going to be using it in this context when you run this kind of an experimental study, da, 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 da. So it's just our conversation, our reasoning that changes a little bit, but at the end of the day, both of them are going to be getting whatever result they want out of it. So working with adult learners, we always have to remember they are adults, they make their decisions and they make their choices. I think for me, and interestingly enough, I haven't experienced this with what we are terming as adult learners. I find this more with undergraduate learners, right? Learners who come in to just get a C and get by. Now, those are learners who kind of confuse me at times. I'm like, I get your motivation there, but also at the same time, you're paying so much of money. Why would you just want to get a C, bring your grade point down and things like that? But I see that more and more in undergraduate level learners than in adult learners, because again, when we come into this environment, we are consciously investing a lot into coming back. We're not doing this simply. And if we're going to be doing all this effort, we are generally of that small band of people who are already so committed to being excellent, and we're already kind of type A personality, so we're always chasing that A kind of thing, right? So I don't see that usually in adult learners, especially in a university environment. Now, if you go out into a work environment and with training and all that, where I'm mandating that everyone sit here and listen to this particular training for 3 hours, then of course it's a different story. Everyone's just there because they have to be there. But on the other hand, when it's you choosing to do things, it's a very different environment, which is why I like working with adults. Difficult and all that, but it is a wonderful experience. Okay, so those were some of the things that I was thinking of when I was doing the readings and your discussion posts as well. Now, the next couple of points, I'm going to, I think, maybe type it up as well, but I've made this note in all of your comment section for the discussion grading, because when I saw this, I did want to highlight this. One is, remember to spread out your posts across 3 days. That's a requirement for this particular course. I noticed some of you only posted on 2 days. Been there, done that. I understand why we do that. Just try and come in on 1 extra day as well. So that's something to think about. APA. When I've seen APA errors, I've tried to show, to give an example of the correct way of doing it in some of the places at least, so that you have an idea of what I'm talking about. Be careful with APA. Reason I mention it is because for your longer assignments, APA citation is going to be very important and you will lose points for it. And the other reason is this program values APA a lot. They put a lot of effort into it. So if I don't do it in my course, you're going to come up against this in some other course, because the ACHIA program is very high on APA. So I'm going to work with you on that. The other thing I noticed is grammatical errors. Now, when we get excited and we start typing out things, sometimes a stream of consciousness thing happens, right? We're just putting it all down there. What I want you to think about is read through your posts at least once. So then you'll see how it flows. The other thing you might want to consider doing is type it out in Microsoft Word. Have it do some of the grammar checks for you, and then copy paste it into Canvas, especially your initial post. And that will reduce the grammatical errors that you might have. Now, again, grammar will be graded in your longer assignments. I'm mentioning it for that reason. The other reason is sometimes your grammatical mistakes give a completely different view of what you're trying to say, almost a counter to what you're actually trying to say, which then becomes problematic, right? So I kind of have to read between the lines and say, okay, that's not what they actually mean. And so you don't want that kind of thing when you're writing up, especially at the master's level with other courses and all that. You want to be a little careful with that. Grammar also, if you're in the ACHIA program itself, grammar also becomes an issue because you'll be doing your portfolio presentation and you have to have a really tight portfolio. Your writing style has to be good. So think about that as you're working through your posts. Now, with the grades and all that, first one, 5 points, really, it's really low stakes. Moving ahead, if you feel that you've lost too many points or you want to try an assignment again, feel free to reach out to me, okay? All right, so that was module 1 and what I saw in module 1. In module 2, this is our first week, which is the reading week. So all you're going to be doing is thinking about the readings that we have and going through that. And so what do we have this time? We are looking at motivation this time. What motivates adults to learn? How can we trigger motivation in the learners itself, right? So you've got Litkowski and Ginsberg. That book was a really nice book. I've used it in different courses. And they talk about motivation. And as you start reading that chapter, right, one thing I'll mention is it's a very accessible chapter to read. It's easy to read, which is not the case with the Rossiter and Clark article. I will admit it, Rossiter and Clark take some time to process, with them talking about teleological and blah, blah, blah. Those words sometimes take time to process. So don't feel bad if you're feeling a little overwhelmed by the Rossiter article. It is a difficult read. And don't let the big words get you down. Their actual story and what they're trying to say behind it is pretty simple. So Litkowski is an easy read, and a lot of what Litkowski and Ginsberg talk about has to do with adult learners and the framework of andragogy, of making it practical to you, of having it be relevant to your life. And this relevance thing is going to come up constantly for us. And they show through studies that relevance is one of the biggest factors that motivates learners, especially adult learners. And for all of you, it's like you're here because you're in an environment where you're teaching adults and you want to make more sense to them. And so there's that relevance element already built in. So relevance is a huge part of it, and they talk about that in motivation. The other thing is, so it's interesting, right? When we're talking about having learning that is relevant or practical, it's also touching on elements of inclusivity, meaning I'm making sure that what I'm teaching you reaches all of my learners. And so it's not only in the context of a few learners, you create an inclusive environment. So one of the simple examples I can think of for this, right, is, I'm not sure where exactly, but in a K-12 environment, teaching for an English essay, right, at the end of the semester, if you're going to give them an examination and you're going to ask them, say, grade 3, grade 4, you're asking them to write about a trip to the beach. Okay, it's a lovely story. People can write about that. Is it an inclusive assessment? Definitely not, because not everyone might have ever seen a beach or know what a beach is. Right? If you're living right in the middle in where Ohio, I think Ohio has that lake over there, but right in the center of the country, you've never seen a beach. How do I write about a beach if I've never been to one, right? So that's not inclusive, because I'm not including their story in my in what I am doing and teaching. So making it relevant to your learners and practical and applicable also creates an inclusive learning environment, which means having content which means being open to everyone's life stories. And that's where the storied concept of it comes. Now, I can only make things relevant to you if I understand your life experiences, or at least I'm open enough to embrace your life experiences in the assessments that you finally produce, right? So that's something that you want to think about. The other thing is motivating learners is also about creating welcoming environments, safe environments. And this was something that you had all mentioned in the discussions, having a safe environment where you feel comfortable to share, where you don't feel threatened for the views that you have, right? And that you're comfortable enough to say, maybe I don't agree with that. Now, there are two parts to this. You need to feel comfortable enough to say, maybe I don't agree with that. But if you're saying, maybe I don't agree with that, you should also be confident enough to know that the rest of the team is not going to attack you for saying that, right? If you say, I don't agree with this, but then the group is all over, well, you don't agree because you don't know this, or you haven't read this, or you just don't have enough exposure. Well, that's definitely not a very welcoming environment. That's a completely a negativity bias kind of thing, where that person's never going to open their mouth again, even if they don't agree with anything, right? So those are things that we need to think about. And if we want to create a safe space for our learners, this is the place to understand what a safe space is and create a safe space. Right now, we were talking also in module 1 about anxiety and how anxiety influences our reactions. Right, one of the things, one of you in your discussion post talked about feedback, and when the minute you see negative feedback, you're like, and then everything you read over there, it's not coming through in the intent that it was offered in, right? Because feedback is meant to improve you, but you're already like, oh my God, they're picking on me, and everything here is going to have a it's going to be colored negatively, and there's nothing good that you're going to get out of that at all. That's just how it is, because we've already drawn curtains on it and said, nope, I'm just not going to work with this kind of thing. What I personally do is, when I get feedback, and this happens often when you are writing for journals and you will get comments from reviewers. Some of them can be really mean comments, very personal comments, to the effect of, I don't think you're, you need help with English because your writing skills are very bad, kind of thing. Really very direct things about you is how they will write, reviewers. Now, you also have to think about the fact that those reviews are going to help make your final product much better. So what do you do? Okay, so for me, what I do is, the first time I read it, of course, it's like, oh my God, all this whole emotional response to it. This is horrible and da 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 da. Okay, fine. But I know where I'm coming from. I know that this is an emotional response. So then what I do is I take a step back for the next 2 or 3 days, just try and take some deep calming breaths and like, okay, let that go. Now let's go in and look only for the positive comments that are going to enhance the work at the end. When I say positive comments, I don't mean things like, oh, this was a great job. No, I'm looking for the things where they're telling me, as in, change paragraph 1, move that to paragraph 2, move this around, do this, do that. That's constructive criticism. So is it nice to know that I've made so many mistakes? No, it's not. But again, now what's motivating me is the story I'm telling myself is different. My story now is, okay, what's the larger goal? Coming out with a better product, which means use this feedback and make those changes in my article. Let go of all the other noise around it, which is not serving me at all. Does not happen in round 1. I can tell you that. It takes conscious effort for us to step in and step out of these spaces. And that's where knowing these things that you're reading now, it makes you a better person, and it makes working with other people better as well. I'm sure you've all had these experiences, right? You have colleagues who just kind of twig you the wrong way. So when there's an email from that colleague, it's always like, oh my God, what does she want now? Kind of thing, that voice in our head, right? And it's those moments that we really need to step out and be like, okay, now let me think of what's happening in my mind. What is my brain doing? Does it need to be doing this now? No, maybe we can change the narrative here. Maybe we can change how we're thinking. And the article by Taylor and Marinow last time around, where they were talking of the brain then and the brain now, then when we had survival mode and we had to go and forage and get food, and now when we're in a completely different environment, now requires us to think through a lot of our instinctive thought processes. And we're in a world where we can and we should be doing that as well. So just throwing some things out there. Okay, the other thing I liked in this is you're going to talk about the theory of margin again, and power and load. And we haven't thought about this in terms of power and load, but you've all thought about this in your lives. You've all had this conversation at homes, right? I can succeed if I get this kind of a support. How many of you, if we were sitting in a classroom and I said, raise your hand if you have a supportive family, I'm pretty sure most of you are going to raise your hands, right? Because you're here at this time of day to do this work because your family is supporting you and saying, hey, go for this, we'll take care of the rest. So that's going to be the power for you. Now, the load is going to be your job that has a deadline tomorrow, right? Your load is going to be the mortgage payment that's coming up when your fees are coming up as well. So it's a balance of load and power, and working within that margin is what's going to add to success. If you have more load, of course, that's going to take away, which is where you might have heard of this. People who are in situations of poverty make bad decisions. And you wonder, why are they doing this? It doesn't make any sense. It's because there is so much load on them that cognitively they cannot process things to be able to make a different decision. It's just that their situation is so strapped. When you're thinking of your next meal, you're not thinking of long-term pictures. So it's that cognitive load and power that we need to be talking about, which is where you have all these, social workers and social services where they come in and say, okay, we will alleviate some of this load. We'll give you some resources so that your cognitive load is balanced out and you can focus on things. So that's kind of where that margin thing comes, especially when you're working with adult literacy programs, immigrants, the more marginalized communities, the more vulnerable communities, this concept of load and power becomes a huge thing in play. All right, then with course climate for student learning, well, those are things that are, oh, okay, yeah, things that you're going to go, yes, makes sense kind of thing. And then, like I mentioned, the Rossiter and Clark article, that is it can be a brain teaser. I'm assuming that you would all feel that way. I know some people really love articles like that. For me, it always twists my brain into knots. The minute I see epistemology and ontology, my brain says bye-bye. And then it's like, every time I see those words, I have to look for the definition. Okay. And I know there's something in my brain that just keeps switching it off for me. But that's where I am. At least I know what my brain is doing, I guess. So if you feel like that for the Rossiter and Clark article, you're not alone. So sometimes I just kind of, okay, and I just pick up the core issues there. And they really talk about the fact that life is not a straight path from beginning to end. Our life experiences change things, and the way we make sense of the world. So it's a very constructivist approach to the world. The way we make sense of the world decides on the developmental journey that we're taking. So one of the examples they use is really nice. If your journey is to become more of a collaborative person who engages more with the community, right? If that's your end goal, okay, then activities like participating in volunteer work or hosting some kind of charity function or things like that, those would be achievements and steps in the right direction towards your goal. On the other hand, being very introspective and really spending time and writing articles and improving yourself individually are wonderful things, are helping your growth. But in this developmental journey of yours, when your end goal is to be more collaborative, doing a whole lot of individual work is not furthering that goal. So then, is this the best thing? Is this making sense for you along this journey? So there are nuances to how we view our life and what we want out of life. And I think that goes to this question of what is success for you, right? What is a good life for you? And that's kind of going to decide how you're going to make sense of the world around you and what you do with it. So Rossiter and Clark is a very critical, thoughtful piece, talking about the meanings and the stories we tell of our lives and how that decides the development of us as people as well. Now, this idea about sharing stories of ourselves, I think I touched upon this right at the beginning, but when we're creating inclusive environments, remember, you need to include different stories into the conversation. And it's different stories in a classroom that widen perspectives. I will never understand another person's experiences until I have been there and done that, right? So for me personally, I've come to understand that terms of privilege and are not as clear cut as they seem. It's not, I can't just say because you're white, you're privileged. That in itself has so many assumptions built into it. So just because, and again, it would make more sense if I told you my story, right? So I'm married to a person from mid-Wisconsin who had a lot of struggles in his life. So he is the quintessential middle-aged white man whom you would think has all the privileges that come with it. Yes, he has. He does have privileges. He will agree to that, right? But on the other hand, he's had a lot of socioeconomic distress in his life. So it's not as simple as, oh, you're white, you're set for life. No, he's had to struggle with food stamps and all kinds of stuff. So those nuances now make me look at people very differently, right? And I've also worked next to, at the UW-Mechia program, when I was there, the chair of the department was Dr. Larry Martin. Okay, he is African-American, very well established, amazing person to know. He grew up during the Jim Crow time, but the work that he put in, his wife put in and all that, socioeconomically, they are very established people now. Okay, so it's not like I look at a person and say, oh, you're Black, so you must be da 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 da. We can't make those assumptions because we don't know stories, we don't know lives. And that's where we need to listen to those stories and be open to hearing about it. One of the reasons I never ask students, I never require students to share photographs is because I personally come from a culture where there are a lot of prescriptions around how women behave and how women will engage in common co-ed environments, right? And so I have to be sensitive to that when I'm working with other learners as well, and be cognizant that there are different stories out there, especially when you go into migrant communities and you're in a social environment or a cultural environment that you're not comfortable with. Maybe we need to have space where women or a particular group needs to sit separately from another group, right? It doesn't mean that I don't like to see any meanings attached to it. You're comfortable there, fine. You're here to learn and that's all that matters, right? If that's what makes it comfortable for you, let's create that space for you. So just remember to listen to stories. There are no right or wrong life experiences. It is an experience. And it's just how we live through it and get to the other side of it. And our job as educators is to try and make things better for you so that you can get to your end goal easily, right? And facilitate that journey towards that goal. And I loved some of the nurses who shared their stories about the trauma that nurses are going through right now and the trauma-induced learning. When you're in a traumatic situation, learning is going to be next to nil. You're not learning because you're just reacting. So you want to create an environment where you move past reacting into a space where they can think and reflect. Okay, so don't expect people to be reacting and learning. That's not going to happen. And those are the things that are the authors and the readings are going to be telling you. Okay, there is an optional video called Young at Heart, but that is completely optional. And the reason I want to reinforce that it is optional is because it is not free. And I generally do not like to put in resources where you have to pay money for them. So this is completely optional. If you feel interested, go ahead, otherwise don't. It does not impact this learning experience in any way whatsoever. Okay, so it's there for you to think about. It's a part of this course, so I just left it in, but don't feel that you need to. Okay. All right. One of the interesting conversations that we've been having is that after the age of 40, cognitive abilities decline. Okay, so let me just jump in here and say, can we all learn till the day we die? Yes. A strong believer in lifelong learning. Okay, so yes, we can learn till the day we die. Are we learning and processing information the same way we did when we were 20 years old? No, we're not. I wouldn't say it's worse or better. I'd say it's different, because the speed of processing might not be at a 20-year-old's, but the quality of my processing is different because I'm bringing in life experiences and my neurons are connecting and making connections that no 20-year-old could ever make. So it is different. At the same time, we have to understand that brain processes do slow down. You know, your joints are creaking as we get older. Every year, something else breaks, right? Hey, first person to admit, it's like, why is the question, right? Every year, something else is slowing down. So we know this is a natural part of growing old. I need my text to be larger now because my eyes are not working that well. Colors make a difference for me now, right? These are things that didn't happen a few years ago. So yes, we're all processing things. We're all slowing down. It doesn't mean, again, that it is not a blanket statement that because that our cognitive capabilities peak. No, our abilities might peak and slow down, but we're all still learners till the day we die. And that's what we need to think about. So small phrasing differences, but keep that in mind as well, especially for us older people, right? The more we start, I think I feel more passionate about this as I grow older to say that, you know, I can still learn. And the younger ones are like, yeah, you're too old, you can't learn anything. And it's true. And it's so interesting, right? So I'm sitting here nowadays, I'm a technology person. I love technology. I like working with technology. And I have just completely closed off things like Instagram and TikTok. TikTok, I'm like hell bent on never signing up for an account on it, right? I'm reading all these articles about the wonderful learning things people are doing on TikTok. And it is curious, but I'm just like, nope, never happening. And one of those reasons is I have no motivation to explore it. There's no practical relevance in my life. And so I'm like, why do I want to waste my time and my cognitive energy processing that? I don't need it. Does that mean I've shut myself off from learning or that my cognitive ability is not there? No, if I wanted to, I could choose not to. So it's fun working with adults and thinking through some of these things. And I really enjoyed the level of engagement you all brought to your discussions and the candor with which you're engaging. My comments are not intended as criticism at all. Like I said, I'm looking at the larger picture of the program and thinking of your success moving ahead. And so that's what I want. And my course is always meant to help you master the skills. So if you want to redo things, I'm here to help you. Now with APA, the first time I came into this program and I was making mistakes with APA, I could not figure it out. The instructor kept trying to tell me what was wrong. I couldn't figure it out. Finally, what she said was, okay, I need a 15-minute call with you and I'm going to show you where you're making mistakes. And that helped. So if that's something that will work for you, let me know. If my comments don't make sense, let me know. I'm here to set up a meeting with you and talk you through it. Okay, so you don't have to struggle alone, as I keep saying. Final note that I want to leave you with is, if you're going to email me, if possible, please use the UWM Outlook for emails. Canvas emails don't connect to the UWM email and it doesn't ping on any of my devices. So they tend to get lost for me. And so 2 or 3 days go and I don't see it. So my request is put it into the UWM inbox, those ping for me, and then I can get back to you on it immediately. All right, that's all I have so far. Thank you both for joining me. Are there any questions you have? Yes, Diana.
Yes, I wanted to ask about the assignment.
Are we talking of the learner autobiography?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was going to talk about it next week, but go ahead. What do you want me to talk?
I can wait. I can wait. I thought I misunderstood it. I thought it was due next week. And so
hold on, don't freak me out. It's due on the 20th, which is the end of next week.
Oh, okay. You're right. You're right. Okay. I'm confused at that.
Okay. So what I will tell you is some things that jump out at me that I will just talk about right now for that assignment is, remember, it says you have to have 3 chapters. Chapters basically meaning 3 sections, and you're supposed to be covering different items in those 3 sections. So make sure you hit that. Now, the assignment is a whole page long. And for this one, when I was going through it, it was like, take a pen and highlight every little thing that you really need to think about as you're writing it out. The other thing is, always remember the rubric is a great checklist for you. So once you've kind of written out a draft, go to the rubric and say, am I hitting all of these things? Because that's going to be very important, because you need to have, so like I said, you have 3 chapters or 3 sections. Each section should have at least 2 theories. Now you can repeat these theories across the sections, but the theories have to be there per section. So these are little things that you could miss. So it's 2 per section. And then you have to look at key concepts, not minor ideas. So for example, chapter 1, you might be talking about confirmation bias and anxiety. Now those are key concepts that we've been talking about, so you can pick up on those, okay? And you have to have at least 5 citations from modules 1 and 2. So you see how nuanced and particular it is. So you're going to look at the readings in module 1 and 2 and pick up at least 5 citations from those. We have enough readings for you to draw from, but you want to be sure that you're hitting these small points. And some of this is very intentionally set up as well to get you to pay attention to detail, because not only is it to get you through the course, it's also to train you how to be better adult learners, right? Especially in our work environments, sometimes what gets us is this attention to detail. It's amazing. And my examples, apologies, come from academics because that's my world. And it's amazing how many proposals get thrown out of conferences just because people hadn't read the word limit, or they haven't read the font requirement. So it's those small things that you need to focus on. And this is kind of teaching you those skills as well. Okay, so yeah, that's what I would say right now. I'll go into more of the details next week, closer to it. You can start making your notes and things like that. If you still want me to go over this with you before next week, let me know, and I'm happy to do that as well.
No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Deanna. All right, so that's all I have for today. Thank you both for joining me. I'm going to stop the recording now, but I'll hang around in case someone else comes, because it is an office hour for a day. Yep, okay. All right, thank you both. Have a good evening.
You too, take care.
Bye.
Good night, and I will see you tomorrow night.
Yep, that you will.